Welcome back to the Biblical History Center podcast. I am the Executive Director of the Biblical History Center, Carlos Cantu, and of course, as always, our Director of Programming and Education, Miss Christy Barker. Are you there, Christy?
Hey.
Hey. It's our second podcast. Folks, you're probably wondering if you've been listening, if this is the second time you've logged in, you're probably wondering, why is there only two? Our apologies. Busy season hit us, and then we got hit with a flood before that. Third podcast. Yes, third podcast. Sorry. Where have we been? And it's only because we have just been incredibly busy, but we're glad to be here. Brian is in the background. I think Brian is going to join us at the next podcast. And then we're also going to have another guest that's another staff member who you'll meet later on in the coming weeks. So with that being said, Christy, before anything else, how are you today? I know I've seen you around, but my door's been closed for a little bit, just for about an hour or so. I'm just in the zone. Everything going okay with you today?
Yeah, everything's going well. Thankful that it's been busy as it has been for Easter. And, just always thankful for all of our guests who want to come through, especially during the Easter season, but also kind of thankful that while it hasn't slowed down exponentially, it has slowed down enough to where I can catch up on some other projects and record a podcast and do that now, and actually get to some of the emails that I've let sit in my inbox for a little bit.
That boss of y'all just put so much of a workload, I tell you.
Yeah, what's his deal?
I know, what is the deal? But, speaking of those kind of deals, we have just been doing so much work within the museum as far as inside the building, outside the facility. We've got a lot of things that we're working on. Christy, me and you this morning were just talking about, about 6 to 7 specific projects that we're currently in the process of executing. Again, folks, as you've been before, the goal for us here at the Biblical History Center is not only to continue inspiring you and teaching you things of the ancient world, but our goal is to continue to evolve so that when you come through those doors, and of course, usually in my office, I can hear our guests come, oh, it looks so different. Oh, you didn't have this before. Things of that nature really keep us going, really remind us why we do what we do. And it's because of you. So we've got about 7 projects we're juggling right now on top of reservations, on top of kids' digs, on top of Shepherd's Bread. And over and over as programming continues. Yeah. Yes. So there's just so much that we're doing, but it's all for the good. It is all for the good of the organization, but also for the glory of God. And that's what we're going to continue to do here at the Biblical History Center. But kicking off, Christy, tell me about what you have found that you felt the need that we needed to put this into the podcast.
Yeah. So there's always something exciting, in my opinion, coming out of
even Israel. Today, we found out, even today with the marbles, right?
Yeah, so there's always something exciting, in my opinion, happening in the world of archaeology, but especially this time of year, just because, dig season is starting to ramp up. People are starting to get excited about things that they found last year that now that they know what they are, So something that I wanted to talk about today are actually, there's a couple things, but I wanted to start us off with the oldest Canaanite sentence.
Oh my goodness.
So there have been older Canaanite words found, just words, but this is a complete sentence. It was found on an ivory comb, I believe from Lachish, which most people are familiar with Lachish from their Bibles or from what's known as the Lachish reliefs from its time when it was conquered by the Assyrians. It's mentioned before the Assyrians got to Hezekiah and Jerusalem, they conquered the city of Lachish. And so this was found in one of the older layers. I believe it was early Bronze Age 3. So this is something that we would see before the Israelites, really. So this is an old part of the city. And it's a complete sentence. So it's really cool. The sentence says, I want to get it exactly right here. It says, "May this ivory tusk root out the lice of the hair and of the beard." And that is just such a fitting thing to have on a comb from this time. And it's actually really interesting, too, because you can tell from what's left of the comb, it was two-sided. So there were thicker tongs, I guess if you could say that, thicker tines of the comb on one side to actually help detangle the hair, and then a very fine comb on the other side to help remove lice from the poor person, get the vermin out of their hair. And so we don't know if this was just like a wish over the comb or if it was actually intended to be like a magical inscription, because many times we do find
somebody was claiming that.
Yeah. Name it and claim it theology right here. It's happening.
Right. We're claiming it right now, right?
Yeah.
Let's slice out of his hair, out of his beard, right?
Oh yeah. Well, the part that another part of the whole thing.
Command.
But another part that I found interesting too is that they actually found pieces of ancient lice stuck between the tines, which means it did its job. It helped to remove lice from this poor person. That's not only about the alphabet, but also just about what was important to people at this time. I mean, I think it's important to everybody to always maintain hygiene, but it also shows too, though, a certain level of wealth in the city at this time.
Yes, I was about to have
Yeah, not everyone can own ivory. This would have been imported probably from Egypt at the time, with the elephants from Africa, the ivory from those tusks being used to make combs, and that's why it says tusk of ivory. May it keep the lice out of your hair and beard. So it's just, yeah, really cool.
But what's even, I mean, for me, and you're absolutely right on that. It is a very impressive comb, is what they found. But the teeth.
Mm-hmm.
The teeth of the comb, they're still there. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
It is impressive that they have hung in there, right?
Oh yeah, I mean they're much shorter than they originally would have been, but
I'm sure.
Yeah, but it reminds me, like, when you go and get like a flea comb for your dog or something like that, it works the same way. The tines are so close together, and that something so delicate lasted for so long is just really impressive.
Oh man, and the beautiful part about it is you continue to learn the details of this item, of this comb, and you realize that the ivory, right? The ivory being such a value, right? The wealthy during those times were the only ones who had access to that type of ivory, especially the size of this thing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. So that's a sizable piece of ivory to have, and it's all one piece to me. It doesn't look like it's been pieced together. And something I like about this though too is that it's such a relatable thing to have. You know what I mean? Like, we still comb our hair today. Guys still comb their beards today. The lice piece might not be as relatable, unless your kids might bring it home from school or something, but it's that part might be a little bit less relatable. We don't have quite as many vermin affecting us on a daily basis nowadays, but it's just so personal. This is a very personal item.
And is it also fair to say, Christy, that we see ivory being used in the ancient time just to create, whether it was something decorative or even functional objects like we see here as we talk about this comb? I mean, there was not only the value of what they used as far as material, but in the things that they made out of it.
Oh, absolutely. So that actually brings us really well to the next discovery that I wanted to talk about. And that's all of these ivory riches that are coming out of an excavation adjacent to the city of David in Jerusalem. It's in the Givati parking lot. They're probably just wanting to do some expansion there, and you have to do excavations, especially when you're that close to the city of David, or you can build. So, and all of these beautiful stylized ivory pieces are coming out of the ground. Now, these are a little bit later than the comb. So the comb that was found was early Bronze Age 3. These all ivory pieces that are coming out of this parking lot excavation are from the Iron Age.
Right.
Which is when we would see the kings of Israel. So this would be from about Saul or David's time all the way to 586 when the Temple Mount fell, Jerusalem fell to the Babylonians. So this is something that has been found in the country before, or in the Middle East, Mesopotamia before, but you typically only see it in very large cultural centers. So like the Assyrian capitals of Nimrod or Samaria, or, there's a bunch of other cities on that impressive list, but now Jerusalem can be added to that list. And it's not just a few pieces here or there, it's over 1,500 ivory pieces that have come out of the ground. And these would have decorated like panels on walls, furniture possibly. And we know that this is kind of to be expected, to be honest with you. I mean, they've never been found before, but in Jerusalem anyway. But the Bible actually in the Old Testament many times mentions ivory furniture and ivory gilding. And just, for example, it says King Solomon in 1 Kings 10:18 made for himself an ivory throne and overlaid it with the finest gold. So that tells us that ivory is like highly valued. Or in Amos 6:4, Amos is denouncing the Israelite nobility who lie on beds of ivory and lounge on their couches. So it's usually considered, very valuable thing and is associated with a palatial residences like we would expect to see in the city of David.
And then, correct me if I'm also wrong on this, because I've read throughout history, when it comes to ivory, despite them being used, as we saw or heard, in combs or made for decorative pieces, ivory itself, in many cultures, including in what we're reading today, they have magical and religious significance attached to them. Is that fair to say as well? That we see that even in the ironing?
So I think it probably depends on the culture. So if we're looking at, monotheistic culture, we're looking at Jewish culture here in the Old Testament, I doubt that they subscribed any magical properties to the ivory decorating their homes. I think it was just more of a status symbol. But if we go farther afield, or if we're looking at possible citizens of Israel who are practicing paganism, then there's possibly a magical kind of element,
which is probably attached to some kind of god, some kind of goddess, some kind of worship item. Is that fair?
Possibly. That's not really what we're seeing with the ivory fragments that are coming out of the City of David excavation here. These are definitely more decorative pieces. So these are not like worship focused pieces, but it would not surprise me if there were at one point, idols made out of ivory or some other sort of worship implements. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's the one that we were looking at earlier. This was tiles, correct?
Yes.
I'm trying to make out what it was. Can you tell? It's almost as if it's flowers around the corner.
Yeah. So those are kind of like the Iron Age answer to the rosette. Those are considered like little rosettes around the edge. And then in the middle, this is a stylized tree. Because if you look, you can kind of see these palm branches sticking out. So this is probably supposed to be a stylized palm tree. Date palms were alive and well in the land of Israel in the Iron Age, and still are. If you've ever been, they're everywhere. So yeah, it's probably a stylized date palm. And it just blows my mind too that out of the 1,500 that they found, like these are pieces that fit together.
Right. You see,
they're getting whole chunks. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can kind of see the picture.
Yeah, and you see the geometry. I mean, such beautiful items. No. I when you were discussing this, I goodness, how beautiful. And that was just recently this month that we find this discovery. So very, very good information. Now, look, coming out of Easter, and we have focused here at the Biblical History Center with our empty tomb tours. We cannot forget, of course, to talk about Jesus, because that's also what we do. But today, now that we've covered these items, since we wanted to talk about new discoveries, we want to look at, and it's fair to say, Christy, that this is Jesus in the synagogue and some of the things that are connected to that.
Yeah. So I wanted to just look and talk about, there's always archaeological excavations, like I said, going on in Israel. But in the Galilee region, something that's always especially interesting to take note of when you're excavating a new town or a village or a city are the synagogues in that town or in that city. Because Jesus did not spend his ministry in Jerusalem. You would think that a religious leader at this time, that's what he would do, because that is the center of the Jewish religion. What we actually see Jesus doing in the Gospels is spending a majority of his time in Galilee, where he grew up in that area. So, and the Bible also describes him as going from synagogue to synagogue, teaching and preaching. I know, for me anyway, growing up, when I thought of Jesus preaching in the Galilee area, I always thought of, like the Sermon on the Mount and him standing on a hill somewhere and everyone, listening to him. And there was some of that, absolutely. But we also see him going from synagogue to synagogue, preaching and teaching. And so the question when you find a synagogue in Galilee is always, could Jesus have have taught here. And so,
And there's two,
well,
if I'm not mistaken,
there are some,
that were found.
there's at least two where we know Jesus had to have been, but there's some others that are considering being added to the list. So the general rule of thumb is, obviously it has to be a synagogue, but there were some synagogues that were built after Jesus. So you kind of have to, weed those out and that kind of thing. But some cities that we see him teaching in often, we see him teaching in Nazareth. First of all, in Luke chapter 4, he taught in the synagogue there. He read a verse from Isaiah, and then it was like the shortest sermon ever. This has now been fulfilled within your hearing. And so, and if you think about it, though, this is an excellent place for Jesus to minister because of the way that the ancient synagogue works. So we know that there are some synagogues that would be designated to just a specific sect of Judaism. So, for example, the Essenes or the Pharisees, or
This was a
something
public,
like that. Yes. So most synagogues, so it has to do with the word itself. Synagogue actually comes from the Greek word synagogue. But if we go to the Hebrew, the word for synagogue is knesset, which means meeting house. And so if you look at Israeli politics today, their parliament building is called the Knesset because it's a meeting house. And so this is what you would have called the synagogues in Hebrew, is Knesset. It's a meeting house. When we talk about the synagogue here in our time tunnel, I always like to compare it to the church on Little House on the Prairie.
There you go.
If you look at the church, they're not just using it to meet for services. And it's the same thing with the ancient synagogue. You're not just using it to meet for services. You're using it to teach. This is where your school is going to be. Anytime the community needs to come and make a decision together, this is where they're going to be doing that. The terrible thing that happened at Masada, the siege there, with the men and the elders of the community just had to decide what they were going to do about the siege. They met in the synagogue at Masada to talk over their fate and make a plan as to what they were going to do. And so, yeah, it's so much more than just a place where you go to listen to teaching.
Right.
And so it would have been a great place for him to access all kinds of people within the community, not just religious leaders, but anyone who wanted to come in and listen. All would have been welcome.
One of the things that stuck out to me, Christy, is as they were uncovering these two synagogues, is they started noticing things within the synagogue, such as the seating arrangement. Is that correct? As far as what the interior walls were looking like. They started to realize more and more and more that this was a synagogue that they were uncovering because of what they were finding.
Yeah. So synagogues usually all have the same basic kind of setup, especially in the first century. Right. Nobody cared if you could see the speaker. Nobody cared if you could see the rabbi.
Christy, okay? Is this something that you've experienced before? Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So nobody cared if you could see the rabbi. It was all about being able to hear. And so the building would be designed in such a way to where, 400 people in some of these synagogues could be housed and you could still hear the speakers. So there's all kinds of pillars and stuff that are probably going to be in your way where you cannot see, but you'll still be able to hear.
You imagine unearthing the frescoed wall, the painted columns, the mosaic floors as you're
Well, especially, we're kind of talking about a little bit about the Magdala, one of the Magdala synagogues. There were two uncovered in Magdala specifically, which makes sense because of its population density. You need more than one building at that point to accommodate. But they depending on the size, they could be very beautiful buildings. Now, we do find some backwater synagogues where there only would have been, not even 100 people present, and very, very small buildings, and those aren't usually as highly decorated. But the one at Magdala that we're referring to has some beautiful frescoes, beautiful mosaic floors, columns to help hold up the ceiling. But honestly, my favorite part of that synagogue is actually the floor, because not only is there Jewish symbolism on the floor, we actually start seeing some early Christian symbols in the mosaic as well.
Right.
Because many of the early Christians were Jews. And so many of the early churches, before it was kind of illegal and people were forced to meet in secret, many of the early Christians who were Jewish found it very natural to meet in the synagogue for their service.
Did you happen to notice, as we're talking about these synagogues, did you happen to notice what was uncovered as far as the inscription? Did you happen to
Yeah.
catch that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this was actually very eye-opening to me because I have always just assumed, why do you need a synagogue in Jerusalem, right? There's the temple right there. So an inscription was found. No synagogue has been uncovered in Jerusalem, by the way, none from this time, but an inscription from it has been found
Confirmed.
in a secondary or tertiary possibly location. And so there's no archaeological remains. Evidence does exist, and it's called the Theodotus inscription. And apparently this was a synagogue that was founded by Theodotus, who was a priest. So that's kind of why it makes sense that it's in Jerusalem. And also the head of the synagogue. And he's in the inscription, it says, for the reading of the law and the teaching of the commandments. And it was meant to accommodate Jewish pilgrims who came from out of town to Jerusalem. So
that was definitely a designation.
Yeah, and it was first century too, which is what's interesting. So the temple was destroyed in 70 AD in the first century, and so yeah, it's interesting to see that possibly pre-temple destruction when you can just go to the temple and worship, right? We see, but maybe this was just made, space is limited. Maybe this was made to accommodate more people. I don't know. There was possibly a synagogue in the first century in Jesus's time in Jerusalem. So I thought that was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because up until, I learned about this inscription, I always thought, well, there's no way that there's a synagogue there. Like, why would you need a synagogue in Jerusalem? But I guess they saw a need.
Yeah.
So.
Well, listen, I don't want to go too much into this, but I'm having a hard time with the images. I can't really see them quite well. Did you happen to catch the stones that were found and the items on the stone? I think I see, is it a menorah that I'm looking at? Possibly a column on the stones. I think that's what I'm seeing. Am I catching that correctly?
Yeah, so you're looking at the Magdala stones, and one of them is very beautifully decorated. It has a menorah. It has a beautiful kind of floral pattern, symmetrical columns, jars. That's probably not a heart, just because of the time. But it's got all kinds of decoration on it. So this is actually fairly, I wouldn't say typical, but it is not unexpected to see from a synagogue in the first century, something that's highly decorated. And this is what I would call typical Jewish art from the time. So you see that it's all inanimate objects of columns and jars or plants. Like there's a floral pattern there of what I think is either sheaves of wheat or possibly date palms and a nice rosette there in the middle. There's a menorah, which is expected Jewish symbolism from this time as well. But there's two things that we don't see, right? And it's two things that we see all over Greco-Roman art, which are people and animals. Those are two things that you never see really in Jewish art from this time. You see it a little bit later. There's a few synagogues where we even see a zodiac calendar, but that's I would say this is more stereotypical Jewish art from this time. And I believe that the fact that they didn't really put people and animals in art stemmed from the fact that they were afraid of making a graven image accidentally. So you wouldn't want to do that.
Well, I'll tell you this. This is certainly been absolutely an impressive, I would say an impressive month of discoveries and the flushing out of these details. I'm just blown away. Even today.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about the marbles. I mean, just.
Oh, yeah. I ran into Carlos's office earlier and I was like, the Vatican is returning.
I'm looking at it now.
The Parthenon marbles. Like, I never thought that would happen within my lifetime. Just because, I mean, it just, why would the Vatican?
Not expected, right?
Yeah, it's just not expected. It's not expected. So, I mean, even though he announced it last year, but I still wasn't expecting it. So now I think they're just.
Until it became real. That's
right. You're right.
Francis, right.
Yes. So now they're just waiting for the British Museum to return. They have about half of the marbles. So there's the other half in the British Museum right now. But anyway, I thought that was very exciting. New archaeological development. Well, again, I never thought it would happen in my lifetime. So.
Well, I never thought Roman Army Day would happen if I could transition into that.
Yeah.
We have been planning and planning and planning Roman Army Day, folks. We promise not to take too much of your time as we have started our podcast. But with that being said, we want to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming items that we've got here at the Biblical History Center. We just finished our empty tomb tours, and by popular demand, we've extended them by 1 week. Is that correct, Christy? Fair to say?
Yeah. So they're extended through tomorrow.
Right. This is it till tomorrow, and we can see exactly why. They're running till tomorrow, of course. We are jam-packed, folks, and we're very grateful for that. We're grateful for you. We're grateful for your support, even just listening to this podcast. But speaking of Roman Army, if I could just circle back, that is happening May 6th. May 6th, we are less than a month away, Christy. Christy is no longer pulling her hair out. However, I'm more than sure that her baby is leaping in the womb, knowing that it is less than a month away. So save the date. We've got live animals. We've got local artists. We've got live performances. We've got ancient crafting. We've implemented a Roman Army boot camp where Roman soldiers or our younger ones, what they would have gone through in ancient times as far as being part of the Roman army. So there's a lot of new things happening. We've got some, of course, we've always got our programming when it comes to biblical meals. We've got some digs scheduled, some shepherd's bread, but we're also having food trucks on site. We've got a lot planned. Roman Army Day has just grown into an event that people look forward to, but we have expanded that because of the amount of individuals that come to us. So we've got that coming. We've got, of course, STEAM days scheduled ahead. If you are a homeschool mom or a homeschool parent that would love to bring your child over to us to experience STEAM days, go on our website at www.biblicalhistorycenter.com, get registered, take a look at some of the lessons we've got upcoming. But if there's anything that I'd like to leave everyone with, is we have got a Roman coin expert coming. Is that right, Christine?
Yes. So Caleb Smith is a Roman coin expert. He's also actually one of our reenactors for Roman Army Day. So he knows all about Rome, all about the Roman world, but he really loves Roman coins in particular. And so he will be giving a virtual lecture here at the end of April, Friday, April 28th. Yes, April 28th. I had to look at my calendar.
6 p.m. It's okay. April 28th at 6
April 28th at 6 p.m. And it's a virtual lecture. And what I love about virtual lectures is that you can enjoy them from the comfort of your own home. You don't have to get in your car and drive all the way here, and you still get a world-class lecture sitting on your couch in your pajamas. No judgment. And it's so fun. We always have a great time with these lectures. And like I said, world-class scholarship here that we're bringing in. So I highly encourage you to check these out if you have any interest at all.
I'm telling you, Caleb is good. I'm very impressed by him. He did a performance last year on stage here at the Biblical History Center. I mean, the man knows his stuff, and I'm very grateful. We're very excited to have him. So, folks, go ahead and get on our website. Go ahead and click the virtual lecture towards the bottom. Register for that. It'll take place once again April the 28th at 6 p.m. So, folks, thank you again for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Find us on all your channels. Make sure you get on our YouTube as well. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. So, Carlos here, your Executive Director at the Biblical History Center, signing off. And
bye, guys.
Christy, our Director of Programming and Education. Brian, I know you're there. We'll see you next week. Folks, thanks so much again. Take care.
Bye.